3 long months under the blazing sun and pouring rain, carefully nurturing every green shoot and tending every row of cassava and corn with endless sweat and hope. Yet in just one night, all the hard work of the Texas farmer was reduced to a devastated battlefield. A sounder of feral hogs mercilessly tore through the fields, rooting up the soil and trampling leaves and stalks into ruins just to dig out a few tender roots beneath the ground. Looking at the destroyed farmland, the farmer's heart sank with grief. This was no longer an ordinary effort to stop crop damage. It had become a campaign of retribution to protect their livelihood and defend the pride of those who live by the land. To deal with these destructive animals that had grown accustomed to raiding crops, Nick knew anger would solve nothing. He began the operation with a patient baiting strategy. First, he scattered sweet corn around the trap site every day without setting the trap, allowing the feral hogs to develop a natural feeding routine and gradually lose their caution. When the timing was right, the trap was finally set and activated. The feral hogs filed into the enclosure one after another to feast on the bait without the slightest suspicion. Snap! The trap slammed shut with absolute precision. Nick immediately arrived and quickly dispatched the destructive feral hogs, bringing this group's rampage across the farmland to an end. At another corner of the property bordering the woods, Nick set another trap and spread fresh bait. The feral hogs were soon drawn in by the sweet scent of food. As darkness fell, the smart trap activated automatically, allowing him to capture the entire sounder of cunning feral hogs. The battle reached its climax late that night. Through a thermal imaging camera, Nick watched the massive corral trap slam shut in the darkness. Early the next morning, he rushed to the scene. To handle such a large group of feral hogs, Nick began installing a sloped wire mesh loading chute that connected the trap directly to the bed of his pickup truck. After relentless pressure, the panicked feral hogs finally rammed straight through the chute and successfully loaded into the truck. To save time, Nick launched a drone to survey the ranch and discovered another sounder of feral hogs had already been caught in the next trap. However, the moment Nick approached the trap with his utility vehicle, the trapped animals became extremely agitated, repeatedly ramming the steel panels while letting out loud grunts. The roar of the engine only frightened them further, sending them racing around the enclosure in search of an escape. All that remained for Nick and his team was to quickly secure the animals before heading home. In addition to capturing entire sounders, Nick also had to deal with the most cunning and aggressive solitary hogs. In a field of tall grass, he spread corn to lure in a true monster of the night. The result was astonishing as he successfully trapped a gigantic boar. After repeatedly slamming into the steel cage, the boar had injured its snout, leaving it bloodied and extremely aggressive, ready to charge anyone who came near. Remaining calm, Nick skillfully used food to lure the boar into a smaller holding cage, then safely loaded the massive boar onto his truck. At another trap near a cornfield, Nick discovered a large solitary feral hog caught inside. He carefully connected the trap to a portable holding cage, guided the feral hog into the smaller cage for easier handling, then pushed the cage onto the bed of his pickup truck. Finally, for the last stubborn feral hog, Nick carefully backed his pickup truck into position to connect the wire mesh loading chute directly to the trap. With just a few firm movements to drive it forward, the feral hog ran straight up into the truck bed safely and cleanly. Beneath the brilliant golden sun of the Texas plains, the sound of the pickup truck carrying its hard-earned catch gradually faded into the horizon. Looking back at the fields that had been ripped apart, Nick knew that losses were an unavoidable part of choosing a life tied to this rugged land. Yet the greatest lesson from this cleanup operation was the unbreakable spirit of the farmer. 3 months of hard work can be destroyed in a single night, but no wild animal can ever crush the human will. Through careful preparation, patient trapping, and courage during close encounters, farmers can clear their land of these destructive invaders, restore the rich green landscape of their ranches, and continue planting the next season's abundant harvests.
Instead of going all in from the start, the first move is strategic, setting up a small drop trap to study behavior. Wild hogs are highly cautious. This phase isn't about catching as many as possible. It's about reading the rhythm. Which hog enters first? Which hangs back? How long before the group reacts? Hit it wrong once, and you don't just lose a night. You lose the next opportunity. In wildlife control, understanding behavior is always worth more than rushing into action. Once herd behavior becomes clear, leaving the same setup too long allows the trap to be recognized, so the strategy evolves. The drop height is increased, the trigger time is shortened, the herd's reaction window is cut to a minimum. An elevated drop trap doesn't need to be more complicated, it just needs to be precise at the moment that matters. In areas where this method is applied, results are usually immediate. The herd has less time to scatter. Group instinct works against them. Multiple animals are held at once, and damage is stopped right at the hotspot. This is what happens when the timing and the method are right.
That's a big hole right there. And that would be the boar. Oh! Shit, grab the gun.
After successful captures, the trap continues to evolve. A cleaner release mechanism, a stronger frame without increasing cost, bait placement adjusted using real data. The goal isn't the biggest trap, it's the trap that fits the farm's exact conditions. Effective control doesn't come from scale, it comes from understanding the problem and refining the smallest details. By cutting off the sounder in time, damage was reduced to a manageable level, and this land is no longer a nightly destination. More importantly, the farmer took back control through observation, discipline, and choosing the right moment. Don't chase the herd, lock down their route, and strike on the right beat. If you've dealt with wild hog damage, share your situation in the comments so others can learn from your experience. This content is for situational context and safety lessons only. It does not replace local guidance. Always follow local laws and work with experienced professionals.
At dawn, the first lights spread across the wide plains of Texas. Riding in our familiar Ford F-250 pickup truck, Nick and I set out for another busy day of work. Here in Texas, feral hogs are a true nightmare. They destroy hundreds of acres of corn, tear up pastures, and pose a direct threat to livestock water sources. Our mission today was to inspect the network of smart traps scattered throughout the ranch. Our first stop was a trap set along the edge of the woods, where the ranch meets the wild backcountry. Nick had installed this trap several days earlier. The moment we shut off the truck's engine, a chorus of harsh squeals and the clang of steel echoed through the trees. The first trap had captured an entire sounder of aggressive feral hogs. As I walked closer, the hogs caught our scent and immediately panicked. They slammed themselves against the heavy steel bars, their eyes blazing and tusks clacking, without hesitation. And to prevent them from damaging the trap, Nick and I quickly drew our rifles and dispatched them cleanly. We loaded the carcasses into the bed of the pickup and continued on our route. We drove toward the central fields. From a distance, a massive circular corral trap came into view. What amazed us was the unbelievable number of feral hogs packed inside. They were crowded shoulder to shoulder, climbing over one another in the confined space. With a catch this large, handling them one by one simply wasn't practical. We backed the pickup truck, already fitted with a large steel transport cage, up to the trap entrance. Nick then connected a portable wire mesh tunnel that linked the trap directly to the cage mounted on the truck. Once the trap gate was opened and the hogs were pressured from behind, they had only one way to go. They rushed through the tunnel one after another, running straight into the steel cage on the truck exactly as intended. It was a perfect combination of practical engineering and years of trapping experience. The truck continued toward an area of dense grassland where the vegetation stood waist high. The third trap brought another surprise. This time, it wasn't a mixed group of hogs. It was an entire feral hog family. Inside the trap was a pair of adult feral hogs. The boar's raised mane made it look especially intimidating, while numerous striped piglets crowded around them. As difficult as it was to see, Texas regulations are very clear. These invasive feral hogs reproduce at an astonishing rate, and releasing them would only cause further destruction to the ecosystem. Nick and I worked together smoothly, dispatched the entire group, and quickly collected the harvest. Since we were already in the area and the morning had fully broken, Nick decided to set a fifth trap along a game trail near a water source. We spread corn as bait, armed the automatic trigger mechanism, and moved on. To our surprise, when we returned later that afternoon to check it, the trap had already sprung. This time there were only 2 medium-sized feral hogs, but we were still pleased with the result. Every hog removed meant another piece of farmland protected. But the highlight of the day awaited us at the fourth trap, located deep inside the main ranch near the livestock feed storage area. As the truck rolled closer, both Nick and I were stunned. The trap was absolutely packed with feral hogs, the largest catch we had seen all season. Dozens of hogs of every size were crammed into the enclosure, squealing frantically as the overpowering stench filled the air. Looking at the scene, the excitement of a successful catch quickly turned into concern. The feral hog population in Texas was growing far too fast. They had become bold enough to wander right up to the doorsteps of local ranchers. We might have caught this many tonight, but how many more would arrive tomorrow? Nick tightened his grip on the steering wheel, fully aware that this battle was far from over. As the sun set, we headed to the western edge of the woods to set our 6th and final trap of the day before returning home for a short rest. When we came back later that night, darkness had completely covered the ranch. The headlights of the Ford F-250 cut through the night and illuminated the steel trap. Another sounder of feral hogs had been captured beneath the Texas moon. Wearing our headlamps, we carried out the familiar processing routine once again. Late that night, our Ford F-250, loaded with the day's harvest, rolled back into the garage. It had been a long, exhausting day, but an exceptionally successful one for both Nick and me. Although the invasion of feral hogs continues to grow more aggressive each year, Texas ranchers have no intention of backing down. With determination, smart trapping systems, and an unwavering spirit, they will continue doing everything they can to protect their land and the fruits of their hard work. Just after daybreak, a light rain had passed over the ranch in California. Water droplets still clung to the oak branches, while the dirt roads leading into the forest had turned muddy after a long night of rain. It was the perfect time to inspect our monitoring sites, as the damp ground preserved tracks far more clearly than usual. I have always enjoyed mornings like this because simply studying the ground can reveal everything that happened in the forest throughout the night. Our first survey site was located in an open clearing within the forest. As soon as we arrived, it was obvious that the area had been extremely active. The ground had been rooted into large patches. Countless hoof prints were deeply pressed into the soft mud, and freshly formed game trails stood out more clearly than ever. It was easy to picture a sounder of feral hogs moving through the area during the hours of steady rain. What caught my attention was not only the number of tracks, but also the extent of the disturbance. A rainy night that seemed so peaceful had actually concealed a remarkably active world of wildlife. As the rain gradually stopped, we continued to the second monitoring site. Although the sun had begun to break through the clouds, the ground remained soaked, with fresh muddy trails stretching across the area. The information we collected here exceeded everyone's expectations. It was clear that this was one of the most frequently used travel corridors around the range. Morgan spent considerable time measuring the distance to nearby water sources, grazing fields, and the forest edge to update the survey map. It reminded me that even small changes in terrain or food availability can quickly turn an area into a major gathering point for wildlife. Leaving the clearing behind, we ventured deeper into the oak forest. The surroundings became much quieter, with only the sound of water dripping from the trees after the rain. The site revealed tracks of many different sizes, from very small to remarkably large, indicating the presence of an entire group made up of animals of different ages. That observation made me pause for a moment. Finding both adult and juvenile tracks in the same area suggested that this was no longer an occasional feeding stop, but part of the regular range of a well-established population. That is extremely valuable information when monitoring wildlife activity and evaluating its impact on the range. By early afternoon, we inspected another location near the forest edge. Large hoof prints standing out in the damp soil immediately drew my attention. Morgan believed they most likely belonged to the same exceptionally large hog that had appeared in previous surveys. Finding its tracks once again confirmed that this travel route was still being used. I felt both excited to gather more data and concerned when I looked toward the nearby fields and grazing areas. Places like these are often where conflicts between agricultural operations and wildlife become most apparent. The fifth survey site was located right along the edge of the range. Although the area itself was relatively small, the remaining tracks showed that a remarkably large individual had passed through only a few hours earlier. Standing among the fresh hoof prints, I realized how different it feels to examine the evidence firsthand compared to simply watching footage from camera. The depth of each print, the freshly disturbed soil, and the flattened patches of grass all helped us better understand the scale of the activity that had taken place during the night. By the time we returned to the ranch, the California sky had turned a deep purple as the sun disappeared below the horizon. Before ending the day, We stopped at one final monitoring site near the equipment barn. The latest data gave everyone pause. Activity recorded there was significantly higher than in previous days, indicating that the animals were appearing much closer to areas used by people. Rather than encouraging us, the findings raised new concerns. If this trend continues, the risk of damage to pastures, livestock feed, and agricultural operations will become increasingly significant. As the long day came to an end, what stayed with me was not any single survey site, but the broader picture of how the entire landscape was changing. The rain had made the tracks easier to read, while also revealing that feral hog activity around the ranch was increasing. Every survey adds another piece to the puzzle, reminding us that effective wildlife management depends on continuous observation, careful analysis, and maintaining a balance between protecting farmers' livelihoods and respecting the natural ecosystem.
You might not realize this, but in wild boar control, the greatest danger doesn't lie in the moment the system is triggered. It lies in what comes after. Invisible traces don't vanish right away. Scent, sound, disturbed behavior patterns. To the rest of the herd, those traces are information. They're clues to answer one question only. Is this place still safe? If handled carelessly, a single intervention point can quietly turn into a familiar checkpoint, one the herd remembers and returns to, raising the risk instead of reducing it. That's why the true goal of the entire system isn't how many animals are caught, but whether the behavioral loop of the herd is fully broken. At the forest edge, the smart enclosure records the first response. A few individuals are held back, while the rest of the herd stays at a distance, watching, not fully retreating. That tells us one thing clearly. This area hasn't been erased from their movement map yet. Instead of waiting longer to draw more in, the control team moves early. The first captured animals are transported out immediately, preventing the site from turning into a confirmation point for the herd behind. Once the vehicle leaves, the forest edge settles back into normal. No signals remain. Nothing left to assess. No reason for the herd to return. In the buffer zone, the system never fully activates. The boars approach, leave traces, then pull away. In many cases, this would be labeled a failed operation. But this time, the response is different. The area isn't left overnight. Biological traces are removed. The space is reset to what we call an information empty zone. At the same time, the transport route from the forest edge is quietly adjusted to pass through this area without leaving new signals behind. When the herd comes back to check, they find nothing familiar, no confirmation. The buffer zone loses its role entirely. It's no longer a link in the herd's movement chain. Near residential areas, the large enclosure system is fully deployed. This is the most sensitive zone, where every action must put community safety first. The rules here are strict. No prolonged handling on site, no gathering points, no curiosity, no uncontrolled contact. The goal isn't just to resolve the immediate situation, but to make sure this place never becomes an attraction point again. In a short time, a high-risk zone is converted back into a safe space for local residents. All captured individuals are transported to the designated handling locations according to regulations. This ensures they don't return to their old territory, don't create location memory for other herds, and don't introduce secondary risks to nearby communities. Throughout the process, transport isn't just a technical step. It's the final lock that seals the entire control system. Once movement is cut off, the chain of risk ends right there. A trap can control individuals, but only proper handling and correct direction can maintain long-term stability. In wild boar management, success isn't measured by how many are caught, but by whether dangerous behavior is prevented from happening again. When the herd signal chain is broken, the risk chain to crops and communities is broken with it. Quietly, responsibly, without extremes. And the greatest success of all, when the community no longer has to think about wild boars at all. Follow us and continue the journey with us. Dramatic, real, and rooted in the mission of protecting our homeland from wild boar threats.
As the sun rises over the Texas countryside, I arrive at Nick's ranch. For weeks, he has been documenting growing signs that feral hogs are moving closer to the areas where his family lives and works. Rooted up fields, damaged fences, and newly formed game trails have convinced both of us to spend the entire day inspecting the monitoring sites that have been prepared in advance. Our first stop is the backyard behind the house. Nick has repeatedly found fresh tracks here and scattered bait the day before to help monitor the level of feral hog activity. When we arrive, the ground is still covered with numerous fresh footprints. It is clear that this remains one of their regular travel routes. I feel relieved that our earlier assumptions were correct, but at the same time, I cannot ignore the concern that the hogs have moved closer to the family's living area than ever before. Leaving the ranch, We head deeper into the forest where Nick says he has often seen groups of feral hogs moving at sunrise and sunset. The air beneath the trees is cool, but the ground has been torn up across a wide area. Layers of overlapping tracks reveal that a large group passed through during the night. Standing there, I understand why Nick often says that even a few days without monitoring can lead to significant damage to pastures and crops. The third survey site is only about 300 meters from the ranch. Such a short distance shows how blurred the boundary has become between farmland and the surrounding natural habitat. As I examine the area, it becomes clear that the feral hogs have been using the same travel corridor repeatedly over many days. This information is especially valuable because it helps Nick identify which sections of fencing need reinforcement and where future monitoring efforts should be concentrated. By early afternoon, we continue to another location near the edge of the forest. The signs here indicate that activity began quite early in the day. I spend considerable time recording the locations of game trails, travel directions, and the distance to the nearest water source. As we combine observations from multiple sites, the overall picture of the hogs' range becomes much clearer. That is exactly what makes today's survey far more valuable than simply examining each location on its own. The fifth site keeps my attention for quite a while. Tracks of many different sizes appear along the same trail, ranging from large adults to young piglets. This tells us that these are not solitary animals searching for food, but an entire sounder living and traveling together. Looking at the long stretches of rooted up ground, I understand why local landowners become increasingly concerned as feral hog populations grow. In a relatively short period, they could dramatically alter the condition of pastures and cultivated land. As the sun gradually disappears behind the oak trees, we return to the final monitoring site, located back on the ranch. Even after a long day in the field, we decide to complete one last inspection to finish collecting the day's data. The results show that feral hog activity near the residential area remains significant. Nick lets out a deep sigh and says that what he hopes for most is not to find more fresh tracks, but to see these travel routes become quieter over time. I completely understand how he feels. For a ranch manager, success is measured not by a single survey, but by whether long-term efforts to protect the land and crops continue to make a real difference. As the day comes to an end, we organize all of our notes, field photographs, and map travel routes. Every survey site adds another piece to the puzzle, helping us better understand how feral hogs use the landscape around the ranch. That knowledge provides an essential foundation for making informed management decisions aimed at reducing conflicts between agriculture and wildlife, while helping preserve the balance of the local ecosystem. The sun had not yet risen above the pine trees when I left the farm to begin checking the monitoring sites we had set up the evening before. Early mornings in Texas always carry a sense of peace, but years of experience have taught me that while people are asleep, the forest is often at its busiest. Every morning, what I look forward to most is not a particular outcome, but the new data that helps explain how the wild boars moved throughout the night. The first site was located in a small clearing deep within the pine forest. Even from a distance, I could see countless fresh tracks and patches of newly rooted soil. As I walked closer, I couldn't hide my surprise at the level of activity recorded there. The scene made it clear that this remained one of the herd's primary travel routes. I spent quite some time examining the direction of the tracks, the entry and exit paths, and the condition of the ground before carefully documenting the entire site. Those seemingly minor details form the foundation for understanding how the boars use this area and help us assess their impact on both the forest and the surrounding grasslands. Around 7 o'clock, as the morning sunlight filtered through the pine trees, I arrived at the second monitoring site. Contrary to my expectations, the area was surprisingly quiet. Only a handful of fresh signs of activity had appeared overnight. To be honest, I felt a little disappointed because just a few days earlier this location had been covered with tracks. But after taking a closer look, I realized this could also be a positive sign. It was possible that the boars had shifted to a different travel route, or that this area was no longer serving as a major gathering point. In wildlife monitoring, a low level of activity is not always bad news. Sometimes it reflects broader changes within the ecosystem. Leaving the pine forest behind, I continued to the third monitoring site near a narrow stretch of grassland. The results were much the same. The data was not as extensive as I had expected, but it added another important piece to the overall picture. As I compared maps collected over several days, I began noticing a pattern. The wild boars seemed to be spreading out rather than concentrating in just a few fixed locations. That realization left me both curious and eager to see whether the trend would continue in the days ahead. By the time the sun was nearly overhead, I reached the fourth monitoring site. The midday Texas heat made traveling more demanding, yet the surroundings remained remarkably peaceful, with towering oak trees and wide open grasslands stretching into the distance. Once again, the data showed activity levels far lower than those recorded in previous weeks. At first, I was disappointed by the lack of new information, but I soon began looking at it from a more optimistic perspective. If this trend continues over time, it could indicate that the pressure wild boars place on this area is gradually decreasing. While more time will be needed before drawing any firm conclusions, it is certainly a promising sign worth monitoring. After midday, the journey suddenly took on an entirely different rhythm as I arrived at the fifth monitoring site. The freshly overturned soil and the maze of overlapping tracks immediately told me that the area had been extremely active during the night. The amount of evidence recorded there far exceeded anything I had expected. Morgan, who was accompanying me, pointed to the map and explained that this location sits between a water source and a recently harvested field, making it a natural crossroads for multiple travel routes. At that moment, I realized that a difference of just a few hundred meters in the landscape can dramatically influence how wildlife uses its habitat. As the afternoon sun softened and long shadows stretched across the ground, we arrived at the final monitoring site of the day. Even though Texas afternoons always carry a special kind of quiet, the evidence before us revealed a night filled with intense wild boar activity. Fresh tracks, flattened patches of grass, and damn, freshly rooted soil spoke louder than words. I stood silently for a few moments, taking in the entire scene before recording the final observations. On the drive back, I reflected on the day's journey and realized that the greatest value did not lie in any single location, but in the way they all connected. Some areas showed a clear decline in activity, while others remained remarkably active. Those contrasts are what help us better understand the movement patterns of wild boars and make more objective assessments of conditions across the landscape. Every survey ends with new questions, and perhaps that is exactly what makes this work so rewarding to continue. The first few days, the hogs approached the trap area but never fully entered. They fed around the edges, stopped, observed. We stayed patient. During this stage, we checked the entire system, from the drop door mechanism to the sensitivity of the trigger device, making sure everything would function perfectly when the real moment arrived. The following night, things began to change. A small group moved deeper inside, no longer stopping at the edges. They started feeding within the trap zone. I monitored everything through the camera system. Once the entire group was fully inside the control area, I activated the system. Bang! The door slammed shut in the darkness. The sound of metal echoed sharply, short, clean, decisive. The hogs scattered in panic, desperately trying to escape, but the locking system held them. Not a single one could break free from this modern trapping system. That was the first confirmation. The trap was working exactly as intended. But I understood that was only the outer edge of the herd. The next morning, we returned to the site. What appeared before us exceeded every expectation. The number of hogs inside the enclosure proved that our plan had succeeded. Even after being captured, the feral hogs continued thrashing violently, trying every possible way to escape. We had to respond quickly, following the proper procedures established by wildlife protection authorities to ensure both safety and humane handling while avoiding unnecessary risks. When everything was finally over, the area slowly returned to its original silence, as if no disturbance had ever happened there at all. The next day, we received reports from local residents about feral hogs invading a nearby ranch. Without hesitation, the entire team moved out immediately. That night, the signals were completely different. More movement, denser activity. This was no longer a small group. It was a large portion of the herd. They approached far more cautiously. The hogs along the outer edge paused longer than usual, as if inspecting the environment. Just one mistake, especially triggering the trap too early, could cause the entire herd to retreat instantly. So I waited. The number inside the trap kept growing, layer by layer. And when the lead hog finally stepped in, I knew the moment had come. Without a second of hesitation, I pressed the trigger decisively. The door slammed shut. Bang! The steel frame shook violently as heavy impacts echoed throughout the area. Inside, the feral hogs fought wildly, throwing all their strength into desperate escape attempts. But the trap system stood firm, completely unmoved by their aggression. As everything slowly calmed down, the true scale of the herd finally revealed itself. Dozens of hogs, adults and piglets alike, were fully contained within the controlled zone. The next morning, we returned once again to inspect the site. This time, the hogs no longer had the strength to struggle as violently as before. Every single one remained secured within a specialized trap system, proving once again how effective the operation had been. Another successful mission. The local residents could finally breathe easier about their crops, at least for now. But we all understood clearly this was not the end. After the traps closed during the night, the most important part was never the moment of activation, but the way we returned to the site after. Daylight always reveals things the darkness hides, movement patterns, the level of impact, and most importantly, whether the trap structure managed to hold the entire herd. As we approached the area, there was no longer the chaos of the night before, only heavy movement from inside. I stopped before getting too close. Observe first. Always. The first signs became immediately clear. The ground around the trapdoor had been torn apart. The steel bars carried marks from repeated impacts, but there was no point of failure. That meant the system had held strong throughout the entire night. And when we looked inside, everything became undeniable. The entire herd had been contained. Not a single one remained outside. No signs of escape. Controlling wildlife in agricultural areas is not a direct confrontation. It is a process of reading behavior, rebuilding patterns, and waiting for the exact right moment to act. An effective trap is not only about its structure, but about how it is introduced into the environment without disrupting the herd's natural routine. When humans are patient enough to understand and disciplined enough not to act too early, control is no longer a matter of luck. It becomes a system. As a field coordinator with the Arizona Wild Boar Rapid Response Team, I have faced countless critical situations, but the chain of events that unfolded recently on the suburban edge still stays with me. Heavy steel structures shook violently. The ground trembled beneath the force of tons of muscle. It all began when cornfields were flattened, driving wild boars out of the fields and into residential areas. 8 a.m., an emergency video was sent to the control center. In the middle of a busy street, an aggressive wild boar suddenly charged out and attacked a pedestrian head-on. It was violent, terrifying, and unbelievably fast. After the dangerous animal was brought under control, our immediate assessment was clear. Food sources in the nearby dry hills had likely been exhausted, forcing the boars down into the neighborhood in search of food. The situation was critical. I ordered all trail access points sealed and launched a full-scale control operation on the hillside above the town. Before any trap could be placed, the technical team spent hours tracking signs. Fresh hoof prints in soft mud, tree bark torn apart, deep rooting marks along the forest edge. Everything pointed to the presence of a large sounder. Once the movement route was confirmed, I authorized deployment of a hexagonal drop trap built with a reinforced steel frame. Size: 6.6 feet, 9.8 feet, built as a reconnaissance setup. To test reactions and estimate the density of the lead group. 11:24 p.m., the camera captured 2 boars, each around 88 pounds, entering the center zone. I immediately triggered the trap. The gate dropped. Both targets were secured cleanly. But through the infrared screen, I could still see larger shadows lingering outside the perimeter. They were too cautious to enter such a tight enclosure. We had moved too quickly. I changed tactics. This time, a box trap made from high-strength aluminum alloy. Size: 4.9 feet, 8.2 feet, fully enclosed, designed to deceive visual suspicion. The target now was not the whole group, but oversized solitary boars with aggressive behavior. Those are the individuals posing the most immediate threat to nearby residents. Around 2 a.m., a giant boar appeared. Estimated weight: nearly 660 pounds. It stepped inside cautiously, then began devouring the fermented corn bake. The trap was triggered. The beast was locked inside. It slammed wildly against the aluminum walls, creating violent metallic crashes. The final solution was deployed: the circular elevated trap. Diameter: 32.8-foot frame. Heavy tubular steel covered with ultra-durable mesh. The entire system was suspended 3.9 feet above the ground by electric winch cables. Its open design made the boars drop their guard. We spread fermented grain in a wide circle beneath the center of the trap. At the transition zone between the hills and town, the giant black trap finally showed movement. Around 10 boars entered in a crowded rush. They shoved, competed, and fed greedily, completely unaware that the trap was already waiting above them. Once the entire group was inside, I pressed the remote trigger. The steel frame dropped free. The system locked instantly. The whole sounder was contained inside the circular barrier. Everything seemed calm until the next morning. Around 8 a.m., one of my teammates called in urgently and told me to check the camera feed immediately. I could hardly believe what I saw. A dense group of wild boars had entered the smaller trap. This version was smaller than the black trap from the night before, but the results were astonishing. I triggered it immediately. No chance to escape. The boars ran in panic, circling desperately, searching for a gap. But the steel structure had sealed every exit. The direct threat to the residential area was officially removed. We loaded into the Land Rover Defender and headed straight to the site. A pickup truck was backed carefully against the trap gate. Using a long guiding pole, we directed each animal into the transport vehicle one by one in an orderly way, minimizing panic as much as possible. In cases where an individual was excessively aggressive and posed immediate danger to the team, humane on-site action was taken to ensure total safety. Watching each animal brought under control and loaded out, A deep sense of relief spread across the team.
Yep.
Controlling wild boars is a test of patience and strategy. From reading signs in the dirt to adapting trap systems in real time, every move must be calculated. Only by understanding their behavior and how they react can we intervene effectively and restore peace to the community.